Welcome, everyone. I'm Ellen Kaspern. I am a custom furniture maker and a educator. I am a full-time instructor at the North Bennett Street School in their cabinet and furniture making program. And I've been teaching for almost 25 years, mostly in continuing ed, and I've been full-time at North Bennett Street for the past 2 years. And I am a graduate from 2003 of the program. So welcome. And they asked me what I wanted to talk about today. And I thought I do a lot with miters. I never liked miters. I think it's really hard joint to do. It's really hard to get them closed. And I avoided them at all costs. I did not like doing them. But then teaching, I wanted to do a 2-day class. So I decided to perfect miters. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. And we're going to start with my slides, Jeff. So I'm going to just go through like cutting techniques, gluing up, different types of splines. So we're going to go over mitered frames, cases, and hopefully bracket feet. It's going to be a lot. So I'm going to ask to hold questions until the end, if that's okay. So we'll go to the first slide. We're going to talk about frames, and just this is the list that I'm going to go through. We're going to talk about how I get it to be perfect, and I'll go to the first slide. So I think the most important thing is the sled that you use, and I brought the sled here. It's for table saw, and if you can see in the photo that I'm at the saw and the blade is here, I'm actually going to put my workpiece here instead of having a sled that's going to go this way. I like this sled because when I'm pushing, the table saw has a lot of force and it just pushes the workpiece back into my fence. And that's why I prefer this sled. It's pretty simple to make. And afterwards, if anyone wants to talk about it, or if I have time at the end, I can talk about how I make the sled. And we're going to go back to the slide. So I think the most important thing is squaring up the blade on the table saw. And I want to square it up on my sled. So you can see that I have my combination square on the sled near where I'm going to make the cut. And I'm just squaring up the blade. And then the next thing that's really important is to start to cut your pieces down to close to their final length. When you first make a cut and you're taking off a pretty big chunk, it can move, the piece can move. So what I want to do is I want to cut it down to about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch over in length. And I want to cut a miter on each side. It is not to length. And I'm going to do that with all of my pieces. So you can see here that I've cut everything down. It's not to the final length, but I'm just cutting a miter on each side. It also helps me keep track because who hasn't cut a miter on on the opposite side? So I definitely like to do that. Yep. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back and I'm going to adjust the sled. So, wood's moving. I have a wooden fence on this sled. It's MDF, but the wood is constantly moving. So I can add tape to adjust. So I definitely want to take my pieces at this time when they're still over in length. And I want to check, is it 90 degrees this way? Is it cutting truly a 45? And I'm using my combination square. And I'm going to get this dialed in. And that's another reason I want the pieces over in length, because I can now make multiple dust cuts and keep checking and keep adjusting. So to adjust, if it's not square, if it's not 90 off of its face, I am going to adjust the angle of the blade. And if it's not cutting the miter at 45 degrees, I can start adding tape to the sled and I can start bumping it out, on one end or on the other if I have to put tape down here. So definitely, I always say tape is your best friend in woodworking. So now I'm making my final cuts. I want to make a dust cut. I feel like this gives me the most accurate cut by taking off less wood. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to take a dust cut on one end of all of my pieces and mark them. And I'm pretty consistent. I'll have everything facing the same way. So in case I forget to mark it, I know it was all maybe the right sides or the left side. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to dust cut one end of all my pieces, taking off a very small amount. And then I'm going to set a stop and I'm going to cut it to length. Also, hopefully not taking off too much wood because I feel like that gives me a more accurate cut. The other thing that I want is when I set a stop block, it's going to cut my pieces to the same length. I like to have a stop block that has a little notch cut out of it. That gives the dust a place to go, because if you're cutting a lot of pieces, dust is going to start getting up in that corner. The sawdust has a place to go. And also, if you see my stall block is angled, of course, I have the cut on the wrong side of this one. But it really, positions it so it can't move around instead of having it on just one corner or out here. So I like to have a 45-degree cut on my stop block as well. Then once I cut everything, while I'm still at the saw, I want to check and I want to see, are my pieces, truly 45? Is everything closing? And I'm going to put everything together and I'm going to use some string, some baker's twine. And this string is definitely important because it doesn't have a lot of stretch to it. So luckily I bought this, but oftentimes, I work in the North End section of Boston, which is the Italian section. There's a lot of bakeries. So we can save our twine. And I'm going to wrap it around the piece. And I can pull it tight and I can really see, is everything closing? Are my miters closing up? And it's really hard to do this by yourself. So, but this is where you want a friend to come over and put their finger there, but I'm going to try. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, right. All right. All right. Excellent. Thank you. Perfect. Thanks, Emma. All right. So I know it was really important to see how Emma, how I tied that. And now I can definitely pick this up. It is tight. So then what I can, and it's closed. I like how it looks. I'll even pass this around, people. You can see it. There you go. Now I made all these pieces a few days ago, but I don't really like to do that. If I'm going to make a miter cut, I want to do it and then glue it up. So, because wood's, we know wood's constantly moving. So I definitely want to do it. And, at this point, hopefully everything is closing and I like it. And now I'm ready to glue up. So there's two ways that I like to glue up frames. One is with string and blocks, and the other one is with some, I have to get I forgot something in the back, but I saw Steve running in and out. So that made me feel good that he was running back and forth and doing things. So this technique is really nice because the string and blocks allows you to cut the miters and glue up right away. The other option is to put on glue blocks. So I did a dry run of this demo on Wednesday with the students at school, and that really helped. And as I was doing it, I said, no questions. I'm going to practice for Fine Woodworking New England. And, everyone's sitting down. I feel really good. And then I hear this, 7 minutes into my demo, this shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. And my mentor, my teacher, who's been there over 40 years, walks in with a chair and sits down. I was like, oh my goodness. So made me really nervous. So I was like, if I can do it in front of him, I can do it in front of all of you, this whole audience out here. So it was kind of funny. So I have the two techniques. So with the string and blocks, I wrap this string around. My cord's getting tied up. So I'm going to put glue on. I'm going to always do a dry run. So I never just clamp anything up because I might not have the right clamps, and when I do the dry run with the string, when I go to glue it up, it's new string. I mean, I've had this like 15 years. So I'm going to throw out the old string. It's kind of stretched out. It's lost its, what it's supposed to do. So I'm going to get new string. I'm going to tie it tight around. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take blocks. So these are 3/4 by 3/4 inch. They're just poplar blocks that I made a strip and then cut them on the table saw. And I'm going to put them between the string and the frame. And I'm going to put them all right in the middle, like you see here. So, whoops, sorry, Jeff. I keep forgetting that I have someone like also videoing me. And then I'm going to push it out towards the end and pushing it out towards the miter to really close them. And this is it's a great, easy technique. This is what I did when I was a student. That same mentor I was talking about, this is what he showed me to do. But you definitely want to start them in the middle and then push them out towards the end. And I do want to let it sit overnight. So miters, they want to open up, at the corners. So I'm really checking. And when you put that glue on, everything starts to swell and do everything. And I'm going to put it on a piece of wax paper so it doesn't stick to my bench. And I don't touch anything. I don't clean anything up. I don't want to add water to it and just leave it overnight. And, hopefully this will make it around too. You can see that. Maybe I should have went the other way for the next group. So that's using the string and block technique. Is really nice because it's a one day, you cut your miters, glue it up. The other technique is to put on glue blocks. So I'm going to see if I can take off. No, it's not glued up, but I'm going to, hold this up or not. I'm sorry. Jeff can zoom in, but we have these triangle blocks on the end. So what I want to do is this will give me I think a much better joint than the string and blocks, putting on these glue blocks. So I like to use something that's a softer wood. So I'll use poplar and a secondary wood or pine. And I am going to just take a piece, see how wide I made this. It's about 1 7/8, could be 1.5, 2 inches, depending on your frame. And I am starting to cut off triangles. And I'm going to add these, which is going to allow me to clamp. The advantage to this is I get a much tighter joint when I do this. The disadvantage is it takes another day because now I have to put the glue blocks on and wait for them to dry. And I have no patience. So I've tried it after a couple hours and of course they've popped off. So I'm going to start cutting out blocks and, you're going to have to cut at a 45. Then you're going to be cutting straight and then cutting out a 45. All right, so this was my string and block setup. Now I'm going to the glue block. So I'm going to cut out 8 triangles. I'm going to miter them. And my pieces are all, again, cut to length. And what I've done is I want to find the center of this miter. So what I want to do is I want to make sure when I put the glue block on, it's the center of the glue block of this edge of the triangle. I have tape on it. So you can see I found the center already. I can just go right up straight from my point and you can see the center of this. And I've always gone and just till this week, I've always gone up and I've measured it and I'm like, okay, it's 9, and this one it's 9/16. Then I made a tick mark and I would put my square on it and I would draw the line. And then I realized preparing this week that if I go right off of, this point of the miter and straight down, I get right to the center. So, you're always learning, always learning. So now what I'm going to do is I want to do a rub joint. So on all of my pieces, I'm going to take some wax paper, make sure I found that center, take my blocks, and make sure I'm putting it on the right way. And since I want the center of the miter, which is this here, I'm going to draw a straw. You know, it's down to the point. I'm going to line point up with point. And then the same thing down here. Put wax paper on. I'm going to line all of my parts of my frame going the same way because it's really easy to put these on backwards. And I also want the long grain of my glue block to be long grain to long grain. I don't want to have the end grain on it because I don't want it to pop off. Now, have I accidentally put the end grain on? Yes, and it's worked out fine, but I prefer long grain to long grain. So I'm going to take it. And then this allows me to, put those clamps on. So just take some yellow glue, if I can open it. Maybe not. So we'll pretend. It's like a cooking show. I love it. Put my glue on. And then it's just rub it, stop, let it sit, and let it sit overnight, 8 hours. And I'm going to do that on all my pieces. Put my glue on, do a little rub joint, and just let it sit there. So then I'm going to put those on. And for this, I like to use a hand screw. So you can see here, I'll take this one off so you can see. I just feel like I get more pressure. If you don't have a hand screw, you definitely can use another clamp, but you can see when you're putting clamps on, oftentimes you need the handle off your bench. The hand screw is really nice because I can do it, hold it up. I can put it flat on the bench and still get to it, but I get much better pressure. So if I'm having problems with my miters, definitely gluing on the glue blocks is the way I want to do it. And then after it dries overnight, I'm going to do, dry clamp it together, get my glue, and then glue all the miters. And then again, I'm going to let it sit again overnight. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about are external splines. I think they're really pretty on a frame, and I'm going to talk about cutting them on the table saw and then also cutting them with my hand saw. So the biggest thing, so the miters want to open up. They're not a strong joint because we know it's almost like end grain to end grain. We do have some long grain. So what's important about the spline is I'm getting that long grain, the grain's going this way. It's that long grain to long grain. I'm getting more long grain to long grain contact. And that's why I want to put a spline in it. And even just veneer, it's still wood. It's still giving me long grain to long grain. So you can just put this in and it's going to do the job. Because I'm just getting that long grain to long grain contact. What I like to do with my spline is I'm going to make another fixture that's going to go over the rip fence of my table saw. And so I have that here. And I've made it to fit over the fence of my table saw. These two pieces right here are exactly the same height. They're taller than the rip fence. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put those over the sled of the table saw and I'm going to put a clamp on them. I wanted to get it really tight. And I'm going to just take another piece of plywood. This is all plywood. I'm just going to put it on top and I'm going to screw it in. I don't care if it's over in length. It just wants to hold these two pieces together that are the same height. Now this can ride over the table saw sled. And then I put another piece of plywood on that's taller. I just want some height. I've used this to cut a frame that was 48 inches by 36 inches. So it doesn't matter. You can go really big with this. And it was no bigger than that. Then what I've done is I've taken some plywood and I've cut, a 45-degree angle on it. And I've screwed it in, making sure that this is 90 degrees. And I don't want to glue these on because as you cut different frames, the miter is going to be in a different place if the frames are thicker or thinner. And so you can see I've started to cut through this. I want to be able to take this off and put new ones on. So I can remove them if I just screw them in, but just make sure the screws are high enough that when you're cutting through your table, if I put them low, you can see I had to remove one, right? I had it too low, and I want to be able to not cut through that. So you can see it's going on the slide show. Yep, it's going over the rip fence, and I can push it, and it's really, I like this. This is really nice. I definitely want to use a rip blade when I'm making the slots. And why do I want to use a rip blade? A combination blade, a crosscut blade has an alternating top bevel grind, so it's those points. And when it makes a cut, if you look at the end of it, to me, I call it Batman ears. You have little points, right? So when I put my spline in, I don't want to see those little points and see glue. I want it to be a rip blade. A true rip blade is flat top, FT. So they're all ground flat. So I get a nice flat surface. So when I put that spline in, it's going to go right up and be flat. And I'm not going to see little glue in those little Batman ears, is what I call them. And, if I'm ripping thicker stock, bigger stock, it takes a lot of force, I'll pull out my rip blade, but I really just save this for cutting the slots for my splines. So I'm going to use that. And you can see here, I have this, I'll pass this sample going that way. Oh, actually, it's this one here. I have it where I have not made a cut, and then where I have made the slot. And let's see. Yep. Spline comes out. Then I have one where I put the spline in, and after I put it in, I'm going to bandsaw it. I'm going to talk about gluing it in. And then I have one where then I've glued it in, let it dry, bandsaw it close. I didn't bandsaw this side, I bandsawed the top edge. Then I'm going to hand plane it. What I want to do with the splines is, let's see where I am on my slides. Oh, here we go. So you can see I've tried just holding it with my hands, but it's going to move this with using this fixture. So I definitely want to clamp it down. So I want to take my fixture, and that's why I made this taller, so I can clamp it down. Put this on here, and I can clamp it, 2 clamps, and I will then have my hand very close. We'll go back to the slides. You can see I have my hand, it's above the blade, so I'm not pushing into the blade, but I definitely want to have my hand close. And when I'm turning this, I'm always referencing off of the same face. So if I have, this is the back side, if that's the face that I made my first cut on, I'm going to keep rotating it because I'm not going to be perfect. I'm not going to get it right in the center of this. And I just want them all to be consistent. So, and I will do test pieces. I'll take something that's the same, some scrap. When you're, making the miters, you're going to have some extra pieces. I'm just going to take a piece that was milled to the same thickness so I can make some test cuts and, see, am I getting it centered? Because every time I do it, I think it's centered and I'm like way off. I don't know what it is, but like every single time. So I'm going to pass this one around then. All right. So then making the splines, I am going to put the pieces through the thickness planer, but they're going to get really thin. And most thickness planers will only allow you to, on my planer, the bed raises. So the bed will only raise up so far because they don't want you to cut into the bed, right? They don't. So it might go up maybe 1/4 of an inch. So all I'm going to do is take a piece of plywood, and I'm going to just set it on top. I don't need to tape it down. I don't need to do anything. And I just send both through at the same time. That allows me to go much thinner. And so I went this thin. So these are the pieces. And then as I'm doing that, I creep up on it. I'm doing it till it fits. People make their splines too tight. And when you put glue, when you start to put glue on, everything swells and it goes in and then it stops and you can't get it in any further. So that's a really big mistake. So a child should be able to pull it apart. So I'm going to pass, I lost this line. That one's pretty good. It's just grabbing it. And then this one, is even better. I don't want to see gaps. To me, fine furniture, there's no gaps. So when I'm looking at it, I also don't want to see gaps. But people will think this is too loose, but it's not. When I put it in, if I can't get it down all the way, the reason I cut off this part here is if it's a point, it just wants to break off. But also if I can't get it in, I can put a little bit more pressure on it. If it's pointy, it's kind of hard to do. And, it's hard to see, did I get it all the way to the bottom? Maybe not. But the nice thing, because the miters are really end grain, the glue kind of sucks in and it just leaves a hole. It doesn't leave like a glob of glue. If I haven't gone all the way down to the bottom and I've stopped like that, the glue just kind of disappears. So then that happened on this one. I just took my chisel, made a little wedge, and then I just shoved it on in there, and very easy to fix. I've also done that with the spline. So I'm going to pass this one around. I'll start over here. Joe. Then you can kind of see that. How am I doing on time? Okay, good. All right. Making the splines, I want to make them bigger. So I'm going to have my piece of wood and I'm going to start putting them in. And I'm going to say, okay, yep, that fits. And then I'm going to mark it out. I have some pencil. I'm going to make it wider than I need it to be. Just going to bandsaw it off. And then I'm going to go to the next one. And I can go like this and mark it. And then I could go to the next corner, pretend this is the next corner, and I can flip it upside down and make another mark. And then I can just go out to the bandsaw and bandsaw all of these out. What I want to do after I've bandsawed them, I want to hand plane the bottom edge, the edge that's going to go in. I want to just make sure it's truly flat. So I'm going to take my hand plane and just run it across a few times, just making sure there's no saw marks and it's truly flat. And then I can stick it in. I always say when I'm teaching, I'll always be like, this is the most important step. It's like a running joke. This is a very important step, this next step. If you forget to hand plane it, it's okay. And if they're too thick, I've also hand planed them down by hand. You'll notice going through the thickness planer that, oh, this fits perfectly, but then this is too tight. And then it's kind of tight, tight, tight. And then towards the end, it's thinner. It happens. So just make lots of splines. And I'm into the sidetrack. I'm into the walnut on walnut because when the same, I've done different splines. I've done holly, I've done maple, but when you put the walnut, the same color for this, if I did cherry on cherry or walnut on walnut, because this is end grain, it's going to show up darker. And I think it's just really pretty because of how it looks. The most important thing. So what I'm going to do is I will put it in my vise. I don't use hide glue a lot. I do use it for putting in splines, and I do inlay, and I'll use it for that. I'm definitely gluing up the corners with yellow glue. But what I want to do is I don't want to put glue on the spline. It will swell and it will start to swell. And then as you put it in, it's going to seize up, especially with yellow glue. The hide glue has a little bit more lubricant, so it slides in a little bit easier. So put it in the groove. Same with inlay. I want to put it in the groove, not on my stringing. Get it in there. Use a glue brush or some veneer. And then I'm going to slide it on in and push it right on down. And I could put a little clamp on it if I wanted to. But normally what I'm doing is let's see, where's that rag I had? Got glue coming on. I can see I'm off. Definitely want to clamp it. I can put a clamp on that. Let it sit. But often what I'm doing is I'm going to the next one. So I'm kind of, when I'm moving it around, I'm clamping the one I've done in my vise. So I will put some wax paper in my vise so that the one that I just glued up, if it's in my vise, it's not dripping down, it's not getting in my vise. And then again, once they're dry, I'm going to bandsaw them and I'm going to hand plane them off. When I'm hand planing them, oh, and also with the glue blocks, after, move this out of the way. If anyone can't see anything, if something's in your way, let me know. The glue blocks, I'm also going to bandsaw off, right? This one glue block was on, I'm going to bandsaw it off. When I hand plane it, I want to always be hand planing in towards the center. I really want to just be touching the remaining glue block. But if I start going this way, this wood's going to break off. It's not backed up. So I really want to make sure I hand plane going in. Same for the splines. Of course, I glued in to what I want to use. Let's see if I can do this. Put this in here. When I hand plane. So I have my spline in. I want to always hand plane this way. If I hand plane going this way, this corner will chip out, even though it's glued in. I did a class. I was like, don't hand plane out towards the edge, hand plane in the middle. It'll break off. You're going to cry. And someone wanted to see what would happen. And they're like, no. And I was like, I told you, don't do that. Why? And then I can kind of come up and I can just start hand planing it flush. Then I'll do the other side, but I'm always working in. If you come off, that corner will chip out. Sad day, your frame is done. All right, so that's exterior. That's that. All right, so hand cut splines. It's a very similar process, but I'm using my dovetail saw and I'm using my veneer. So what you're going to want to do is, I have a couple dovetail saws. These are not actually the two that I use for cutting dovetails. That one is a blue blade. But this is a Diston that my dad had, and it's actually perfect for the veneer I have. So I want to make some test cuts, and will my veneer fit in? So the dovetail saw that I have to cut dovetails with is actually too thin of a kerf, and this veneer won't fit in it. So do some test cuts and make sure your veneer that you're using fits in that saw. So these two saws actually work really well for the veneer I have. And I'm into this dyed poplar, but it's the same thing. So you can see here that I have it. It's the same process. I'm going to cut out little triangles. I cut them out and I fit, I get all four ready and I'm like, okay, I like these. These are obviously very brittle, but I'm going to do the same thing with my hand plane. I'm going to come over and I'm just going to run it off, and I'm just jointing that edge. And have my plane blade out too far. And I just want to straighten it out. So then when it goes in, it really goes down into those corners. And I've definitely also taken off little wedges of veneer and stuck it in there if I've had a little gap. This one I glued in and it's dried. I also I don't want the splines to come out. I don't want it to poke out. So I'm thinking about that when I'm cutting, when I'm at the table. So I'm thinking about how high is the blade so I don't cut through. So I'm definitely doing all of that layout. And then with these, I'm going to actually move this out of the way. Let's see where I can put it. With the veneer splines, I'm actually going to chisel them flush. All right. So I can see how this goes. But again, I'm always working going in. Oh, it's not too good. Let's see if I can get it around that way. Everyone see? I'm going to come up and I want to start, and I'm just going to start chiseling it off. I have no patience. I want to glue it in and then I want to start chiseling right away, but don't do it. Go down. And then get it flush. So I'm just going to flush it up. It's a little proud. Referencing the back of my chisel, which I flattened on my workpiece. And so similar technique to the hand plane. But not going that way. Definitely going in towards the center on my pieces. Yep, sticking it in and chiseling it. I want to talk about cutting mitered cases next. And I like to do this using all these techniques that I'm cutting the miters. I'm using the table saw, but I'm just using different techniques. So for this one, just like when I'm cutting frames, I'm going to have everything to thickness and to width, but I want my pieces over in length. So this piece is over in length. The miter pencil, nope, had a pencil right there. Okay, so the miter is going to end up going from here to here, and I still have about 1/4 of an inch. And on this side, I actually have much more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of my pieces and I'm going to lay them out where I think that the 45-degree cut is going to be. And then I'm going to take some MDF and I'm going to rip this on the table saw at 45. And again, I want to know the center of this miter. I want to know where this exact center is. And if I draw that line from that corner straight down, that's going to match up with the center of my miter, because that's what's going to give me the best pressure on the miters. So I want to then have everything slightly over in length. I'm going to lay everything out. And I could do it on this one. I could just make you can't see. Just going to pretend this is how long I want it. This is where the miter is going to be. And then, so this is all going to be waist here. Right here is the center of my miter, but if I draw this line straight up, that's coming to the center of the miter. So when I put these glue blocks on, this is so I know that this is my sample. It's blue tape. This one here, done the same thing. I've already done the layout work on it. And this is also a rub joint. I'm going to glue these on. I want these to be a little bit smaller than the length of this should be a little bit smaller than the width of this, so that when I go to glue up, this is my jointed edge, this is my table saw edge. I can make sure that it's going to sit flat and that these glue blocks aren't sticking out. That way I can have everything sitting nicely on the table like that, and they're not too tall. And then what I can do is, of course, I put it on that side. Let's redo this. Yes. All right, that's my miter. Again, this is all going to be waist. I'm going to glue this on. No, I did it right the first time. No, I didn't. Miters, they're confusing. Whoops, drew the line wrong. No pressure. All right, so that's that center of that miter. It's going right there. I'm going to glue this on just like that. So what I want to do, again, these are not cut to length. I want to cut to length, and I want to cut the glue block. I can hold it on there. I'm going to glue this on like that, so that the two miters, the centers meet up. That's giving me the best pressure when I'm clamping. But this is all going away, so I'm actually going to cut to here. I want to have these glue blocks on and cut my pieces to length. No miters cut in them, cut to length. That's this right here. That way I can angle my table saw blade to 45 and I can reference this off of the L fence and I can cut that miter. So the blade is, now I have a right tilt saw. So, but if you have a left tilt saw, you have to move your fence to the other side of the table saw. And then I'm going to angle this, but this is riding against the L. So the blades tilt it. This is riding against my L fence. And so again, the blade's going to be underneath there and they're already cut to length. And then I'm starting to cut my miters. I don't want to go exactly to the full length of the miter yet. I want to creep up. So you can see here, I have it in here. Yep. You can see I haven't cut completely to 45 because what I want to do is I want to cut 2 corners of my case and then I want to put them together. Let's see. And I want to put them together. If we go to the slideshow, I have a photo of me doing it. And then I'm testing, is it really cutting at 45? Yes, it is. No, it's not. But I haven't gone to the full length, so I can still adjust my saw and do another dust cut and creep up on it. Then when I get it exactly where I want it to be, I'm going to start cutting all 8 corners. But again, I'm not going to go to the full length. I'm still going to do that partial cut, and I'm going to put everything together. So again, they're not going out to the corners yet, but I can put it all together and be like, is everything closing? Does everything look right? And then I can be like, yep, I like it. It's good. You know, I'm using those. I have my, I'm using those glue blocks. They're helping me clamp. And then I can go and cut my final miters. So it's all about creeping up on everything. Let's see, how am I doing on? Okay, 15 minutes. All right. And then same thing, you can cut a case, hand splines. The spline, it's giving strength. It's not about the thickness of the spline. It's all about that long grain to long grain contact. So here I've just made a case for teen class I'm going to teach this summer. They're going to make a mitered nightstand and we're going to do some fun splines. So same process, layout. And that is mitered cases. All right. So the other thing that I want to talk about are inside splines. So maybe you don't want to see, maybe you want a case, but you don't want to see the splines. You want to make a box. So you want to make a slot in the middle. So we can do that. And I put those right here. So I'm using the router table to make that slot on the inside. Let's go to the next picture. So I have this fixture, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down. I'm going to put it on a very flat surface. So I usually put it on the table saw is right next to the router table. So I'm going to put it on my table saw. I'm going to slide this down, make sure that the miters on these are already cut. So these pieces, I'm going to cut everything to length. I'm actually going to use the miter gauge at the table saw. I'm going to tilt the blade to 45 and I'm going to have my miters. You could also do it with the glue blocks. You could do it either way. You could do this technique where you have glue blocks on. 45s need to be cut. That's for obviously for an inside spline. The 45 degrees need to be cut. So I can take my piece, whether it has glue blocks on. This one, I'm not going to use glue blocks. I'm going to do a different technique. I'm going to use clamping cauls. But to make the slot, I'm going to slide this down on this fixture and make sure that the miter is really on a flat surface and totally touching. And I'm going to clamp it on. Actually, I'm going to have this it's good to have something to reference off of. So I have this strip on here that I can reference off of. And it's just tacked in so I can move it if I need to. And this is going to slide down when I do this. Yep, every time. Get it closer. See if I can do it. I'm going to clamp it on. I always use 2 clamps because 1 clamp is a pivot point. I don't want it to move. I'm going to put on my 2 clamps. Doesn't matter where they are as long as I have 2. Oh, actually, I put it upside down. Yes, because this fixture this has a back open, so I can actually get a clamp on the top where this didn't. So stick this on here, clamp it up here. Again, I want to make sure it's nice and flat on the table saw. The miter is truly resting flat, so the table saw is a really flat surface. Get this on here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a straight bit. So I'm going to have this on here. My router bit is sticking out, but I need to know where the router bit is starting to start cutting and end cutting. And I'm going to have, if my router bit is between here and here, I'm going to line my line up with that. And I have a fence on my router table, like so. It's not going to sit flat. I can do it. What I have to do is I have to take this whole fixture, hold it up against the fence, and I'm going to slide the whole fixture down. It's going to engage with the straight bit, and I'm going to have a stop here, and then I'm going to slide it over to where the other line is, and I'm going to stop it. But the whole fixture rides down the fence. A lot of people think you make this fixture and then you take your piece and you slide it down. It's too hard. You want to take this whole thing and you're going to slide it down. And that's how I'm going to make a slot in here. So I made a slot in the middle using that flush straight bit. And then you could use plywood as a spline. I just milled up some solid wood because this was a last minute thing I decided to talk about with the miters. And I did not pick a straight bit that fit a piece of plywood that I had. So I just milled up some wood. But again, the grain is going this way. It's all about that long grain. The grain's going this way, long grain to long grain connection. That's going to keep that miter closed. So I want that long grain to long grain in there. And then since I do not have glue blocks on here, but let's get that to fit in. All right, like so, and close it up. So that's cutting an inside slot using the router table. And then the last thing that I'm going to talk about, I think I still have time, are gluing up bracket feet. So if you want to make a piece of furniture that has a bracket foot, my next slide, a bracket foot. So that's this here, right? We only have two sides. We have one corner. So again, I could put glue blocks on here. I could put on those MDF. I could glue on this MDF glue block and, and do a very similar technique. But I don't want to do that. So what I have these clamping cauls. So very thin piece of plywood. This is some MDF that's been veneered. And I have these triangles on it. And what I can do is I can take some hand screws. And we'll do it on this one that I have not done yet. So I was talking, luckily I teach with my mentor, and I was talking to him about it. And I'm like, do you want to bandsaw this out first? He does. He would like to bandsaw it out first, but you could bandsaw it out afterwards. But why not drill the hole for this nice bracket foot here first and then bandsaw it out? Otherwise, you have to have the pattern on the inside. If it's glued together to bandsaw it, you now need to bandsaw it like this. So I'd have to trace the pattern on the inside. So if I don't want to do that, I can bandsaw it out first. This one I didn't. I just drew the pattern on. Get my clamping cauls. And then get my hand screw. I just want to, the hand screw is just holding the clamping caul to my piece. Get that in there. Get another caul and then another hand screw. No pressure doing the hand screw in front of people, you know. Put that on there. I have some sandpaper on it so it doesn't slide around. I ripped those on the table saw. I just ripped off a corner. And put this in here. So now the clamping cauls are on. And then I can take my clamps. And I have nothing to hand plane off, bandsaw off. So these on. Bracket feet. So end it with something that goes with a piece of furniture with the clamping cauls. That's it. Any questions? How did I do? All right. Yeah, 8 minutes. Yes. The first question was how tall is your router fence when you're using the fixture to do the inside spline? And I said it was probably about 4 or 5 inches tall. But I have all different, we have all different heights of router fences. And then, or you could even just, you're not going very far on the router table with this small box. So you could even clamp a piece of plywood and then go back and forth. The next question was, how do I get the glue blocks off? I said I bandsaw them and then I hand plane them. So I have my piece. Again, I have a right tilt saw, Rockwell Unisaw. I love a table saw. So Rockwell Unisaw tilts to the right. And you can see here that that's why it's really important that this MDF block is put on and cut so it's the same length as my workpiece. And then the blade is angled at 45. And I'm just literally riding it. You can you can just ride it right against the fence. And that's how I do it. Yep. Oh, these? Oh, you can go as big as you want, right? It's pretty easy. Yeah. So as big as you want. I mean, I more wanted to be like off the saw, I'm getting it totally closed, but with a bracket foot, I definitely would want to take off, I can definitely hand plane this if it's not. So I can take this and I could put it in my vise and I can just shoot off those saw marks, right? So definitely do that. And that's the other thing. If I can't get it off the saw, definitely use a shooting board. No, definitely. I'm all about, not having saw marks. And I do use hand tools as much as I do machines, but if I can get it like really good off the machine and then come back and just clean up anything that I don't want, definitely. Yep. Anyone? Yes. All right. How am I on time? I think it's 2:30, but if anyone has any questions afterwards, let me know. Hope this was helpful and try it. Excellent.